All right. Thanks everybody for joining us today. We are live with William Ross from Wolf Crypto team today. This was something that we've been kind of planning on doing for a while now. Finally, we said, all right, today is going to be the day. So, really excited to dive into the DePIN. As you know, William is someone who is really deep into DePINs and and RWA.
I
He
use
knows
that
so
pun
much
way too
about it.
much.
No, it's incredible. And um he is really great about educating communities about DeepIn and also teaching people how to really monetize from that. And so and also just want to make sure that we put it out there, anything that we discuss here today, not financial advice, purely for educational purposes. So yeah, how are you doing today, William?
I'm doing good. I'm doing really good. I just got off a space, a really awesome space. I think Bits was there. Bits, thank you so much for stopping by, man. Um, and then what was it? Before that, I was actually on a call about doing another hotspot install, another helium hotspot install. So,
Oh
yeah, just
wow.
growing the DPIN business. Go one unit at a time, one business at a time, trying to grow that passive income, of course. So, yeah, overall, it's been a good day. Obviously, markets are less than favorable. I know that we got a little bit of pumps, a little bit of green today on some tokens, but
Mhm.
overall, it's been sad. But I'm
Yeah,
feeling
yeah,
good. I'm feeling good.
yeah, yeah. It's basically the markets are kind of shaky right now. Bits, how are you doing today?
Morning. I am
Good morning.
I'm well. Yeah, no, look, I got plenty of rest. Had movie night with the fam last night. We were watching Dune 2. So watched
Ah,
Ooh, I
Dune 2.
love that.
That was a good movie. And man, but it's what's like 3 4 hours, something like that. Long movie.
Yeah,
Long
yeah.
movie.
mhm.
Basically finished and I said I'm going to bed. And so got some good rest last night and just feeling like I'm drinking my coffee and I feel like I'm just getting back into work mode and ready for the new week.
Yeah, no, this is exciting. And of course, right after the show, Bits and I will also be going live with our trading session. So excited for that. Let's see if we can catch any moves today. But yeah, we'll go ahead and get right into it. So, William, if you want to do a little bit of introduction about yourself, who you are. Of course, I know you. Most of us know you, but just for those people who may be tuning in for the first time, if you can give us a quick intro and then also tell us about how you got into DeepIn. And then we'll, of course, dive into the basics.
I wish I brought like baby photos to share on the screen. I could really dive into who I am, my background, and just like go through my life. I mean, no, in all seriousness
Dude,
though, yeah. I mean,
I
with,
wanted
with
I wanted to reach for like a laugh emoji to do like little laugh emojis like on spaces, and I was like, man, I can't do
yeah,
these
what if
on
I just
here.
started off? I just like pulled up a picture of me as a kid. Like, so this is me when I was 8 years old. This is when I first traded my first stock. No, no. No, in all seriousness, no, yeah, my name is William. Been in the crypto space, overall, the Web3 space since about 20. I've known of it for a while, but 2020 is when I really dove in, like right when COVID happened. I'd been trading equities for a while before that. And I knew of Bitcoin and Ethereum, but I didn't quite understand what they were. I just knew that they existed. And so I basically took that time to like educate myself, learn, and then I really dove in. I was big on Twitch. I streamed on Twitch a lot. I wouldn't say I was big, but I streamed like video games on Twitch during COVID, and I met an awesome community doing that. And then through one of them, I dove into the Web3 world. It was pretty crazy. That's another story for another time, though. But yeah, because of them, I got really deep in NFTs, really deep into ETH and all that. And then at some point, I think it was 2022, around the FTX collapse, I kind of outside of trading and all of that, I was kind of struggling to find like a use case for this technology. And I was like, man, like, what am I doing here? Like, what is this for? Like, why is this just like, what am I doing? Like, what are we building? And lo and behold, I go on a space and I meet with a couple people. I think Scott Fu was on there as well. And we were talking about real world assets and then subsequently went into DPINs. And so I discovered one of my very first DPINs, surprisingly, was not helium, but it was something called Silencio. Silencio was a noise pollution data collection app on your phone. It was a free application. You go on Google Play or you go on Apple Store and on your smartphone, and you just download it and start letting them use your microphone to collect noise pollution data. And I didn't really understand it until I started doing more research. And I was like, wait a minute, this data is worth like millions of dollars on an annual basis.
Hmm.
There's a market for it. And so, these guys are catering to that market. So it stands to reason that their project would do pretty well. And lo and behold, I just like fell down the rabbit hole after that. I really pushed on the free DePIN model. So what I mean by that is, and we're going to get into it later, of course, but there's essentially two different types of DePINs. There's the paid for type where you have to install hardware, purchase hardware, kind of put up some capital to risk. And then there's other DePIN types where you simply download an application, provide data, or provide some kind of service that you might already have, where it's like maybe your bandwidth or your GPU that you already own in your computer, which is essentially you paid for it early on, but it's essentially free at some point. Once you get some capital return on that, depending on what business you're running off your computer. But yeah, I mean, there's many different types of DePIN. So that's essentially, I was kind of a proponent of the free DePIN model. You still have the Silencio app? Hell yeah, Nat. No, so do I. I mean, they're still cooking. They've iterated a lot. I cannot wait to talk about them today. I love the team there. But yeah, I've been a huge proponent of like, hey, if you have the resources, just go ahead and download that app. Like, why not? You already have internet, you already have a smartphone. You might as well make a couple extra bucks on it if you can. Doing pretty much next to nothing in terms of requirements or tasks. Anyways, I fell into that crowd, started making content on it, basically just educating people, kind of making some funny content too, entertaining people. I have a passion for simplifying things, trying to take complex ideas and relate them to people with a similar monkey brain as me, where I try to, make it like really, really dumb. But yeah, anyways, long story short, that's what I do. I make content. I help projects try to market their ideas out to people in as simple way as possible. But I also started my own DePIN deployment business. So on the paid hardware front, I do purchase hardware from different DePIN projects, and I go out and install them at local businesses, helping my local community out, going across the state even to places like Jacksonville and St. Augustine, Orlando, and installing hotspots out there as well. Talking with restaurants, cafes, etc., places with a lot of people, a lot of foot traffic. So that's pretty much what I do. That's how I got into DePIN, and excited to be here.
That's awesome. Great introduction there, William. Thank you so much for that. I see a bunch of community members joining. Hello, Net. Thank you for joining. Carl, Dawson. Really excited to have you all up here. So, William, if we were to start from like the very basics, what exactly are DePIN? What does DePIN mean? DEPIN. I know what it is, but if you can just kind of break it down for everybody here, that would be great.
Yeah, so a lot of people will, I'm hoping a lot of people know what it is at this point, but yeah, for those of you that don't know, DePIN stands for Decentralized Physical Infrastructure Network. It's pretty self-explanatory, pretty straightforward. It's a decentralized network of nodes. So very similar to, if you think about Bitcoin, even like a lot of people will equate Bitcoin to a DePIN. I mean, technically it is kind of to a degree where it's a decentralized network of people, contributing resources, using energy, in exchange, earning Bitcoin. And that's pretty much the idea around DePIN. But where DePIN differentiates itself from things like Bitcoin is that you actually have a service, or you have like a specific type of need. It's not just like, hey, proof of work, solve some complex puzzles and we'll pay you in Bitcoins. It's like, hey, provide cell phone data. Hey, provide this specific type of data. Hey, collect this type of data. Hey, provide this service, and then we'll pay you for that. So in essence, think of it like, the way I think of it is, imagine you're a business. Imagine you're a startup and you're like, man, I don't have any capital. I can't really compete with any of these larger entities. So what do I do in the field you're in? Okay, so I can't compete with the large entities in the field that are established already, and I have very little capital. How about I offset my capital expenditures by allowing other people to build my business for me, and in exchange, I'll provide them payment via a speculative token, or some equity, because it's like, tokens in this sense kind of are pseudo equity in that sense, in the Web3 way that we do things here. And so that's how DePINs are initially born, especially ones that don't have pre-revenue, ones that don't have like established revenue sources. So in exchange for, taking on all that risk, like let's say you're a deployer out there, like, and this DePIN project contacts you and says, hey, like, would you want to buy some hardware devices for me and then install this for me? You take on all the risk, and in exchange, I'll hand you some tokens, and good luck, essentially. That's how DePIN started. And there's been a lot of DePINs that, have spread, done really well. There's a lot of DePINs that have also died, and it just didn't really get, kick up off the ground there. So essentially that's what DePIN is, and how I differentiate it from things like Bitcoin is that you're actually providing a real service. You're spreading and growing a real business, becoming part of a business that's providing a service or providing some form of data, as opposed to just doing this kind of, I'm not going to call like nothing burger work, like for Bitcoin proof of work, but you get what I'm saying. It's not just like random equations or, stuff you're solving to, then get a block going. It's like, hey, I'm giving you cell phone service. I'm giving you yada, 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 like some type of data or service.
So we already have companies that are giving you cell phone service. We already have companies that are giving you internet. Why do we need decentralized networks to do that? Like, what's the message behind it?
So the message behind it is that a lot of these companies are either overcharging you, maybe the service isn't as good, and maybe the infrastructure isn't as laid out as it needs to be. So in things like Helium's case, Helium being one of the more premier DePINs, one of the more prominent DePINs. If you ever type in the word DePIN, you're probably going to see Helium pop up at some point. So a lot of people call it kind of the father of DePIN. They fill in the gaps. So like AT&T and T-Mobile, for instance, like these major cell phone companies, they aren't everywhere, right? They have a lot of connectivity everywhere. There's a lot of, there's a lot of towers installed. Maybe you have like decent service where you're at, but then you walk inside a building and your service is either cut in half, it's super slow. And now you as a customer are, maybe you're disgruntled. Maybe you're like, well, what the hell? I had supposed to have 5G. I pay for 5G phone service, pay $150 a month for this. How come this isn't working? And so what Helium decided to do was fill in the gaps there, fill in the gaps of coverage. I mean, I'm sure you've been out in the middle of nowhere and had zero cell phone coverage. That's what Helium is trying to do, is fill in those gaps and spread their network out. And what they've proven is that these cell phone companies, they want that. Like AT&T is paying them money. T-Mobile is paying them money now to use their network, because they're like, shit, we're getting faster service for our customers. It's stronger and it's cheaper for us to use. So in the end, with DePIN, you get a better service and you drive down costs. So that's the ultimate goal of a DePIN, and that's why it works so well. Is you're able to get at least bare minimum the service you're already getting, and at a fraction of the cost. Like I'm paying for the Helium cell phone plan right now. I pay $30 a month for unlimited 5G, and I get to hook up to Helium hotspots, anywhere I'm at, like completely for free. So I think that's the main goal of DePIN. If I were to sum it up, why DePIN works so well: you're driving down costs, you're saving money, but you're also getting a service that is adequate to what you're already getting, if not better.
That's awesome. Really exciting, really. So when we say Helium is providing services in different areas where there may not be already service available, and so that talk to us about that a little bit. Where, like, how do they do that? How do they make it happen? Um, it's because if you don't, a lot of times if there's like, are they partnering up with anyone locally? Like, how does that work?
So they have partnerships locally. Like there's partnerships with airports, even like you have a lot of airports that are on board the Helium network now. I think, what is it? Is it Boston or is it Baltimore Airport that's on board? There's an airport in Washington now they're basically all Helium hotspots, and they're now all their Wi-Fi infrastructure they have turned into Helium hotspots. And so I say that to say that they're piggybacking on internet infrastructure, right? So you can't have connectivity just pop out of nowhere. You need some kind of form of infrastructure. And so the idea is that if you incentivize enough people to build out this network, you then have more people that maybe have connections to these internet companies, or maybe know how to install their own internet via satellite or via some other method, that then get a part of your network and build it out and continue to build this infrastructure. And so as long as the incentives are there, your infrastructure will continue to scale and grow. And they do this by piggybacking off of like fiber optic internet, essentially. So as long as the internet's there, you can install this hotspot. It uses Wi-Fi 6, Wi-Fi 7 pretty much. And you have this pass point system now that can, instead of going to a cell phone tower, you're piggybacking off of like, whatever internet provider you have. And there's other DePIN internet providers that are coming on board too, which we can get into later, that are bypassing even what these like Comcast and Metronet are doing with their internet services. Things like Dawn, for instance, are creating a mesh network that are just basically all peer-to-peer internet servers, which is insane to think about. But yeah, you're essentially using current infrastructure that may exist already or may be coming to fruition, and giving and creating another form of infrastructure for other companies to utilize, like AT&T. Because just because Comcast Internet's there doesn't mean AT&T automatically gets service from Comcast, right? And the fact that Helium kind of got here and did it first and built on top of what, like, let's say Comcast built, or let's say Starlink built, AT&T now has a cheaper method to go and say, hey, instead of us building out this network because it's going to be so cost intensive, let's just use what Helium's already built. They're charging us very little money, and it's kind of like a win-win-win situation at that point. Their customers are happy, they're saving money. We're happy. Like, we spent very little money to install this infrastructure. We're making money now, and their customers are extremely happy. So now we're getting more service because more customers are using our network, and yada 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 and so forth. Like, you have a positive feedback loop essentially.
That's incredible. I do want to reset the room here for a second. If you haven't already done that, please make sure that everybody who's joining us today, you're liking, retweeting the space, and also leaving a comment for us. Really exciting conversation today. Bits, do you have any questions as well? I want to bring you into the conversation. How do you feel so far?
No, look, I'm just I'm following along here. Makes a lot of sense. I think the question with this stuff is always, and again, here's like just my trader brain, right? But
Mhm.
my brain always goes back to like, how much of this do you think is being affected by the, quote unquote, like 4-year cycles and some of those pressures there? Are companies, like, do you see a lot of these DePIN companies, are they positioning where they're like setting up, some kind of reserve, a treasury, so they have a little bit of runway in case you do go into that kind of stuff? Because they raise a lot of money, some of these companies. I mean, they have great backers. They they're set up for success. I think the question really becomes in this space, like, are they are they going to be able to weather the storm, I guess, if you will, while they're still developing? And are there any like plans that they typically have built around that until they get to a point where they really start to get some of that adoption? And like, even with the way they're rewarding
Yeah.
The people that are out there deploying, right, with the speculative asset. Yeah, I'm just kind of curious, like, thoughts around all of that. And again, like, this is just my trader brain thinking of like a little bit of like investor brain. So yeah,
No,
appreciate it.
it's a good question, but it's a really good question. And I think it's a completely valid one. It's one that DePIN is tackling as we speak, right? So you have a lot of projects that, again, I've said have died, and that's because those teams didn't really, one, they never pivoted. They weren't really good at pivoting. They weren't really good at kind of taking the punches and kind of finding some way out of maybe a mess they were in. But two, they didn't have runway. I mean, they used their runway poorly, or they just didn't have it at all. So what you're seeing now is the DePINs that have survived up until now, they've had runway. They continue to have runway. They're getting customers. They're getting usage. And so that kind of feeds into like a treasury style system, like you talked about, that they have, that continues to give them more runway. In terms of getting more value to these token investors, or people who hold these tokens, people who are getting paid in these tokens, the typical style that's been used, the typical way that has been done, that's kind of been decided upon by the community, has been the buyback and burn model. And so what you do is you don't ever charge
Mm,
your, not ever, but there's some DePINs that do, but for a majority of these massive DePINs, they don't let their customers interact with the token necessarily. So like, let's just use Helium again as the example with
right.
AT&T. AT&T won't go and buy AT&T tokens off the open market. AT&T goes and buys data credits. So these data credits are a separate currency that me as a deployer and you as a token investor never see. We never see the data credits. We see them on chain, but they're a thing that we can't, or we see them like on a Dune
But
dashboard on
they,
chain
they
there.
they buy those from Helium directly.
They buy those from Helium directly, so they buy the data credits out. They
Okay.
buy like months in advance to use in a dollar denominated fashion. So the data credits are 1-to-1 for US dollars,
Mm,
and then they use those data credits. They deploy those data credits when they have customers that need to use the Helium network. And so if you have like 1,000 customers near a Helium hotspot, let's say there's a massive block party going on, and the cell tower is getting overrun. The cell tower is just like clogged to all get out, and they're like, shit, our customers they have shitty phone service. What are we going to do? We need to give them phone service. Oh, there's a Helium hotspot right there. Let's just use these data credits. We'll pay him for all this data that our customers are using.
mm,
We'll redirect their traffic to that hotspot. And so those data credits are then used to burn an amount of H&T tokens, so dollar denominated amount of H&T tokens equivalent to the dollar amount of data usage that's been used. So the theory right now, there hasn't been like public numbers released by Helium, but people have kind of worked out the math and have figured out it's about 50 cents per gigabyte that AT&T is paying. So like and T-Mobile, I believe they're both paying 50 cents a gigabyte on the H&T network. And so if you have 20 gigabytes being used on your hotspot, that's $10 right there typically in H&T tokens that you're going to receive. That's being burned on the network and paid out to you. So you have a that buyback and burn model. And what we're seeing with the token prices now though is that it hasn't necessarily been working out the way we'd hoped, because you almost need like a ton of revenue to enter the network to really offset a lot of the dilution that hit these networks early on.
Yep.
And I'll kind of break that down. So I talked about it on the trading space, I think last week or the week before, but it was last Friday. But like early DePINs like Helium, like HiveMap, or like these really premier ones that have existed for 5 or 6 years, they had to dish out a lot of tokens early on to incentivize the network to grow.
Sure.
And so they just emitted a ton of tokens. And during a high liquidity hype cycle like we had in 2021, that works, right? Like that's totally fine. Number go up, everyone's happy, the party's going on, money's free flowing. Helium hits $50. Everyone's like, oh my God, I'm making $1,000 a month, or I'm making $10,000 a month, like for installing these hotspots. This is incredible. But then reality hits, liquidity crunch happens, people start selling, you have a cascading sell effect there, and you need real revenue to come and buy back and burn, and kind of support that rising bid, if you will. The problem with back then though was that Helium didn't have any revenue, or it had very little revenue. And so back then, they were barely making maybe $100,000 a year, maybe even less than that. Now we're making 20 million annually, but because we had so much dilution in the market, it's going to take a while for us to work through those tokens and burn those tokens. And so until then, you're going to have kind of this downward, not deflationary, but inflationary pressure that's hit us. And even though Helium hit net deflationary status, I think back in October last year, because of how much revenue the network's earning now, it's not enough. It needs more time essentially and more revenue.
Are they also slowing down in like the circulation of new tokens? Like I'm not really familiar. Is there a cap on total supply, and are they like some of those numbers that I guess my question is like, in order to offset, right? Because you're talking about all these like deflationary measures, you have to make sure that that's also greater than any kind of inflationary actions that are still happening on the network, right? So like token unlocks, giving tokens to KOLs or strategic partners, like those types of things. You said early on they had to do a lot of that, and that makes sense. I think that's pretty normal, pretty clear that early on that's probably your main way of really getting the word out there, getting partners, raising capital. At this point now, are you seeing that they're still using tokens in that manner aggressively, or did some of that slow down and now it's really just the partnerships are in place? Other than like the tokens that are being given out to DePIN deployers and the people that are like helping to grow that, are they still sitting on a reserve of tokens that they're using to onboard other people with new unlock schedules? Like, is that still happening?
To my knowledge, no, or not nearly as much. I mean, like you said, back in the day, that was a very commonplace thing. But to my knowledge, the emission that's happening on the network now is just normal. It's just like in according to with how much usage the network gets, the emission level changes. Hard cap wise, I don't remember if there's a hard cap. I haven't looked at tokenomics in a bit, but there might be. I think there is. But I know that again, we hit that net deflationary status where more tokens are getting burned on a daily basis than minted back in October. And so that was an important milestone to reach, because there had been enough revenue to come onto the network to burn enough tokens to then supersede that emission schedule there. My point was though that the time is so important though, because again, there's so many tokens out there that in order for that deflationary burn to really mean anything, it needs to work through all that supply. And it needs time to do that. So either you substantially increase your revenue by 10x immediately to work through more, or you just have this steady growth of revenue, steadily decreasing the inflationary pressure over time, the emission schedule there. And I'll show you, here's the Helium network right here. Let me share my screen. If you go to a website called world.helium.com, That's this site here. You can actually just see an overview of how the Helium network's doing. So let me pull my screen up here. Bam. And so you can see new hotspots that are installed. You can see daily active users here. Right now, you have 2 million, just about 2 million cell phones every day hooking up to the network. And so that's 2 million people that have no idea they're getting involved with crypto. They're
That was
just
my
benefiting.
question. Like the
Yeah.
people, when you get switched onto that, like you said, the example of AT&T earlier, the end user doesn't really notice it. They're clueless, right? There's no changes on.
You'll see like a Wi-Fi symbol pop up like above your cell your bars or your cell phone bars, or it's like to the side there. And when you click on it, it'll say Helium, but it's
Oh,
essentially just a
okay.
Passpoint Wi-Fi system. So like if you go to Times Square and you're a Helium subscriber, or you're a AT&T subscriber, or you're a
Yep.
T-Mobile subscriber, you'll see that you're connected to the Helium network most of the time in
Oh,
Times Square, New
interesting.
York. Yeah, like I went to the NASDAQ for a Wolf Financial event, and I remember I looked at my phone and I was like, oh, look at that, I'm hooked up to Helium, awesome.
Nice.
And that was someone's hotspot providing me service. So yeah, none of these people pretty much have zero idea that they're utilizing this, or if they see it, they're like, oh, cool, like free Wi-Fi or free Passpoint Wi-Fi, awesome. As you can see, the number of hotspots has been increasing steadily over time. We're at 124,000 in Mexico as well as North America here, and I think Puerto Rico as well down there, with Brazil coming online as well. Brazil is very, very new. Brazil just got added to the list there. But yeah, network traffic, we're at 80 terabytes per day being transferred there. About $40,000, almost like $37,000 there being printed, not being printed, but being made a day. So if you zoom in,
from the carriers is where that
yeah,
revenue
from the
comes
carriers.
from. Okay.
That's
Yep.
AT&T and T-Mobile revenue coming onto the network every day. So yeah, if you zoom in, you can see like all over Florida.
And where does that revenue go then? So like when that revenue is brought
goes into
in,
the token. It goes into that buyback and burn
into the
model. So
buyback, directly into the
yeah,
buyback.
yeah. So they take that token, they take that $36,000, and they go, okay, let's buy $36,000 worth of H&T tokens today,
Got it.
and then we'll burn it. And then
Okay.
they throw it in a burn wallet, and they call it a day. So you get it out of circulation, of course. There are talks in place for Helium right now where they're considering not even burning the token anymore. They might just do a buyback and store it in a treasury,
Yeah,
maybe use
you
it
get to
later
a
on.
point. Yeah, you get to a point also, right, where it's like you want to look at measures that continue to make the company comfy in terms of operational treasury and like things like that, right? So I mean, I get like I get the pressure from the community and the people that are sitting on a bunch of tokens for like, no, keep buying and burning it. You know, I want
Yeah,
number go up, but yeah, like I think it would make sense if at some point, and like, is there a council or is there like a DAO that kind of votes on some of this stuff? How does that work?
Yeah, there's Helium proposals. So there's
Okay,
the token acts as a governance token. So when you
got it.
stake it, you get something called VHNT, and then you use that as voting power to vote on
Okay,
proposals of the network. And the network's
got it.
changed dramatically over time. I mean, like
Nice.
Helium has put a lot of bad taste in a lot of people's mouths over several years because of the iterations they've
Sure.
made. But I would argue that it was important for them to do that to survive, because
Right.
the current, like, they started off as an IoT network, an Internet of Things network,
I remember
and
that.
that network, it still exists, but it makes very little revenue, and there's a ton of hotspots out there still. And I mean, they're earning pennies, they're earning like pennies every day. It's not enough to really reasonably ask someone to install a unit somewhere and say, hey, like, make some money. The money's just not there. And so
Right.
they had to pivot to cellular offload. They started with something called CBRS radios, which are very bulky, very expensive devices that are like $3,000 a device. And they found that the CBRS radio wasn't what the carriers really wanted, because the offload, like the handoff, the handshake, wasn't there. So like, if I were to connect to a CBRS radio from a cell phone tower, like if my phone were to switch, it takes like 5 minutes to
Got
actually
it.
do that. So
So
like
there'd be a
you'd have,
noticeable lag or
yeah,
disruption, right?
you'd have
Yeah.
no service. There'd be a disruption, exactly. And so the AT&T was like, "Nah, we're good, fam. Like, we don't
Yeah.
want that." And so they had to switch to the Wi-Fi offload. And so anyone who bought a CBRS radio was kind of screwed. They're like, "Well, I just spent all this money. What the hell, dude?" And because the community wanted to pivot, and so we pivoted to mobile, and now it's working out. We pivoted to this Wi-Fi offload, and it's working out very, very well. And so people who are getting involved in the Wi-Fi offload game are, they're making pretty decent money. But yeah, here's the numbers here. Helium actually kind of differs from other DePINs in the sense that they're not just a decentralized network. They actually have their own cell phone business too on the side. It's called Helium Mobile.
For the mobile.
And so you have 600,000 people using the cell phone service. which they used to actually take the revenue from the cell phone service and dump it into the token as well, which increased the burn rate
Yeah.
substantially. But they, with all the token price action going on, like there's the downturn happening, they basically turned that off and said, hey, listen, we're going to not burn 100% of our revenue anymore. We're going to take our revenue and just like fund it into research and development and growing our company. And I think that was a fair play because they kind of they said this is a waste of our money, it's a waste of our time doing this because the token price just keeps falling, and that's back when it was $2. Now it's $1. So they made a pretty good decision, I would argue. Which brings me to another idea that the DePIN space is kind of mulling over right now, and that is stablecoin payments. So a lot of people are talking about, hey, in the beginning, a token makes sense. A speculative token to pay people makes sense because maybe you don't have the revenue, maybe you have zero revenue, and you're trying to build this network out, and so you need to pay people something or incentivize them to do so. But at some point, or is there a point where a DePIN gets mature enough that you can start paying in stables? You can start paying people one-to-one the amount of value that they're bringing to the network with a stablecoin, as opposed to paying them a token. Then you bring into question, okay, what's the point of the token now? And so, there's a lot of people that are mulling over ideas. There's DePINs coming out that are paying in stables, where you like stake in stable, it's called. There's a model stake in stable that's coming out where people are getting a token, staking it, and then receiving stable rewards for the staking. Which is pretty neat, I think. So there's not a definitive, one size fits all model for DePIN in terms of payment. We're still in the early trial phase for that, but there is still money to be made in deploying for sure.
Great back and forth there, both of you. Thank you for that. There's just so much information here. It's like information overload. So, William, I want us to kind of break it down for people who want to get involved with DePIN. So, let's say that there's somebody who wants to earn some money. They want to deploy some, devices. How do they get started? What's the first step that they need to take? And then also, what are some of the companies that you are working with currently where you are deploying their devices and actually earning passive income from that?
Yeah, so great question. I'm excited to dive into this part. So I talked about in the beginning of the show here how there was the free DePINs, like there's the software DePINs essentially, then you have hardware DePINs, like stuff you have to actually buy. And so if you're looking to get in the DePIN space, I honestly would recommend initially getting involved with these software DePINs. For the most part, they're free. You don't have to put any capital down. There's like literally zero risk for you, and you will earn some tokens. Granted, because they're free and because there's so many people getting involved, there is a slight dilutionary effect there where you're not going to earn as much revenue as per se, with a Helium hotspot or like with a XNet unit or a number of these other things. But if you're just like, if you have like a smartphone, for instance, if you have, a computer, you can download like 10 or 15 different DePIN projects right now, and you'll earn a little bit of money. You'll earn some tokens. I mean, Grass was a big one. I'm sure you guys might have heard of Grass when that came out. That was a bandwidth DePIN. That's an AI DePIN right there, or a data scraper, where you would download this Chrome extension and you just let it run in the background, and it's scraping the internet, utilizing your bandwidth. So it would use your internet, piggyback off your internet, go and scrape data on the internet. And then that data scraping, all that information they're gathering is very valuable. It's very useful. And in a report, the State of DePIN report I showed you last week, actually, they were found to have made about $12 million, I think, last year from all of that, from a free Chrome extension. And people earned, their tokens through that, which was sick. It was awesome. So that's one of them. There's a number of other ones. I could be here forever talking about all the different bandwidth DePINs you can install. So that's just kind of like the main, more popular one, if you will. The other DePINs, again, on your phone, there's Silencio. We talked about Silencio earlier. That's a free app, noise pollution data app that you walk around, you measure noise pollution, and they take that data, sell it to people on the open market. They've also since pivoted. So this is one reason I really love what Silencio has done. So one of the reasons I supported them early on was because they're so innovative. Like, the team is very good at pivoting. They're very, very idea driven. Their vision is incredible. And so they didn't just want to stop at noise pollution. They wanted to turn their app into like an everything app. And so they actually started doing AI and robotics training using this data on their application. And so now you can actually talk, like they'll have requests from companies. They'll send you the request and say, hey, Bits, use our application. Can you say these 3 sentences for us? And we'll pay you $15. They'll pay you $15 in stable coins as opposed to, the Silencio token. That they're kind of one of the first DePINs to start really paying in stablecoins one-to-one with that. So it's really neat. That's completely for free. You can go on your phone right now, download the app. You'll see the requests in the tab, the AI robotics tab. Hit that, and in whatever language, it's globally. So if you speak, whatever language they need, and they need a lot of languages on there, they'll pay you. They'll pay you stablecoins right now. You can do stablecoin reward stuff. It's pretty sick. So that's one of the ones I'd highly recommend getting involved in today, like right now. I could post my referral code in the comments or whatever. You can use that. That'd be sick. But Silencio is sick for that. Another one that's really neat that requires literally zero effort on your part is 375 Go. I'm actually wearing their hat right now. This is the 375 AI logo. I talked about them on the show on Friday, lady, about that DePIN that they install devices on billboards and collect traffic data, but they also collect internet usage data on the phone with that free app. And so as long as you're traveling, as long as like you have your phone on, let's say you're driving to work, or let's say you're driving to go see friends, or you're going to go see family, like you're driving a couple hours to go see family, if this application is on and tracking you in these hexes, they'll pay you tokens. Granted, it's not a whole lot of money. Like I said, it's a free app. So it's, it's very, very, very little capital, but you're still accruing tokens passively. So it's kind of like a, why not get involved with that, So those are some of the premier ones right there that I would get involved with immediately on the free side. On the other side of that, you have the hardware DePINs. So things like Helium, things like XNet, things like GeoNet. That's a really popular one. You have to buy devices. So you buy devices from this provider, and then you go and install them in favorable locations according to what the provider, what the DePIN is telling you to do, and saying, hey, you should install in these locations, these types of locations, and then you make money. It's pretty great. But again, there is risk. There is risk with that, of course. You have Helium hotspots costing about $250. You have GeoNet hotspots costing like $700, in some cases $1,000. And so you have to kind of weigh out what the ROI is going to be on that. With Helium, it's kind of hard to measure and gauge because it depends on the traffic. So like, for instance, I have some hotspots earning, $400 a month. I have other hotspots earning $20 a month, So it just really depends on how much like foot traffic is in there, how many people are using their cell phones. Holidays matter, school matters, work matters. So it's like, oh, if this is a really popular lunch spot, I'm going to get a high spike in data usage during lunch, but maybe the weekends this place is dead. So like maybe you're not making any money on the weekends. So that does take into effect there on the Helium side of things. With GeoNet, on the other hand, you're earning a very steady stream of tokens on a daily basis. They have a different kind of DePIN that it caters to. It's a GPS. Sorry, I don't want to get too far into GeoNet here, but it's an RTK system. So what RTK is essentially GPS improvement. GPS is not very accurate, and so these nodes act as a middleman between satellites and your phone or whatever is needing GPS, and makes that GPS more accurate, like by the centimeter instead of by 100 meters. And companies will pay for that. And they'll pay GeoNet to use that service, their RTK network, and then that gets funneled in the token, so on and so forth. So the demand might not be as great there, but you're still earning like a passive revenue of like $6 a day. Maybe you're earning $3 a day. I can't really say, but those are the kind of two different ways to get involved. I'd highly recommend getting involved in the free side first, downloading things like Silencio, 375 Go, Nadix, kind of getting familiar with this idea, and then maybe risking some capital, getting into Helium, and then going from there.
Dude, I'm surprised. Like, is there anything right now that is doing kind of like like maybe a desktop or living room type of solution? Here's where I'm going with this, right?
Okay.
Back in the PS3 days, dude, I remember this, and this is going way back. There used to be a thing like, dude, this was probably like the first or one of the early versions of DePIN without, unfortunately, like this was too early. It was without rewards, right? But this was back. I mean, when was this? When was the PS3? This was like
2007.
Yeah, it was like, okay, so like way back then. But there used to be an app called Folding at Home on the PlayStation 3 back then. And basically what it was is if you had a PlayStation 3 console, you could set it up that when you weren't playing a game, when you weren't watching a movie, when you weren't using your PS3, it was contributing distributed computing power to doing like protein folding simulations. And then they were using that research for cancer, Parkinson's, like all kinds of
Yeah.
stuff that was related to that, right? And it was this groundbreaking thing, because it was like, think of all the millions of consoles, or it might even been more, hundreds of millions of consoles. I don't know how many consoles there were. There was a lot of PS3 consoles, but how many of these PS3 owners could essentially be doing distributed compute collaboration and contribution to science or to something like that? You just didn't have a reward mechanism back then. Like, you were doing it
No
doing it
incentive
for
model.
free. There was no
Yeah.
incentive model. You were doing it for free. You were wasting electricity doing it, but it was cool. Like, it was still like, ooh, my thing's like contributing to science or whatever.
I'm so happy you
Dude,
bring this up. Sorry to cut you off, but I'm so happy you bring this up because DePIN's been around for a long time. Like, people
yeah.
don't realize that the model has been around forever. You've been giving away this data for free.
Yep.
You let these companies, these mega corporations, utilize your data completely for free. They give you some services, of course, to use, like Google. They give you Gmail and like all this stuff in Chrome, but they make so much money off of you. It's like, I almost like equate DePIN to kind of taking some of the power back and saying, wait a minute, I want to get paid for this. And Wingbits is another DePIN. They are a great example of that. So Wingbits does flight tracking data, and you wouldn't imagine how much money is in flight tracking. It's actually insane how much money is in flight tracking. I'm talking like tens of billions of dollars is in flight tracking. Like, Lockheed Martin pays for a lot of that, and it kind of gets insane. But people back in like the 80s, like flight enthusiasts, have been powering our flight tracking networks for decades. And these guys don't get paid any money. They install these antennas that cost them like thousands of dollars, maybe like a couple grand or a grand. And in exchange, these companies would like take this data from them and say, hey, we'll give you access to like the flight tracking dashboard and all these data sets. And so these guys are just so like into the idea of like they're the flight enthusiasts. They love just like checking out the data. Yeah. And they're like, oh, this is so sick. I have access to this private dashboard. Meanwhile, the guys that are taking this data from these companies are making billions of dollars off of them. And so Wingbits was like, yo, why don't we just start paying these dudes? And so Wingbits penetrated the market there, saw a need, communicated with these flight tracking enthusiasts and said, hey, listen, use our devices instead. It does the same exact thing you're doing now, and we'll pay you money. And you get access to a dashboard. And they're like, oh, that's sick.
Like, is there anyone that's targeting the gamers currently? Like, think of all the PlayStation 5s, all the Xbox consoles. There's already ways that people with like a desktop computer or a laptop can go on and do like AI power lending. Like, there's already that stuff. I'm talking about GPU compute. Yeah, but is there like something that's like in the DePIN blockchain world, crypto world, that's thinking, you know what, there's a lot of PS5 consoles, there's a lot of Xbox consoles, and when these people are at work, when the kids are at school, when they're not, like, we can offer an incentive model for that hardware that's just sitting there doing absolutely nothing, that provides some kind of service. I don't know. Like, is there? It seems like such a crazy market.
There's talks
after
in using PlayStations and Xboxes. Like, obviously the hardware's there, but the thing is, you'd have to flash it. Like, you'd have to like basically flash it to become like a computer, and then use the hardware just for that purpose. Like,
or they have to work with Sony or Microsoft, right, to get some kind of partnership deal or something.
I could see a partnership happening there. So like the thing you're seeing now is major companies getting involved in DePIN. So like not just AT&T and T-Mobile, but like Uber's testing out this idea, and you could argue that Uber was kind of a DePIN in its own right, because it decentralized and scaled its network by passing off its CapEx to the drivers. It said, hey, listen, you guys take on the responsibility. You use your own car. We'll pay you money for spreading our network out. But the problem with Uber's model is that it's inherently it's centralized. And so what happens is all that value kind of siphons up to the top. It doesn't spread out to the rest of the drivers. It gets siphoned to the top, and slowly but surely they take more and more and more. And so like Uber, for instance, used to pay its drivers like 70% of the ride share. Now it's 40%, bro. And they're getting fucked over. They're getting screwed over. Sorry for my French, but it's like that's the problem with the centralized model. But what Uber's doing now is they're asking drivers to do like film their driving. They're asking drivers to do these tasks for them, and they're paying them money for it, because Uber understands the name of the game is data. Data is everything. Data is the new oil. Data is money. And so they can incentivize their driver who's already out driving to, hey, use your phone that has a camera on it. Can you just like film this street? And then the driver doesn't know what the fuck's going on. The driver's like, oh yeah, like sure.
All that contributes to the maps and the things like that, right?
And they're like, here, we'll pay you like $5 for that. Don't worry, even though that data is worth way more. And they have to, sure enough, they do it. And so there's a lot of those mapping DePINs that are coming out too. That's just an example. But yeah, to your point, Fitz, there's so many GPU compute DePIN projects. I would argue it's probably the most saturated DePIN market ever. Very competitive too. There's a number of ones that are just like not used that much. There's a number of ones that are heavily used, and it's amazing. And there's a lot of money to be made there, of course. But currently, you can't use your PlayStation 5 or Xbox that I know of to contribute to DePINs. I hope one day, because I have my PS5 sitting there right now. But you can use your GPU in your PC to contribute to a number of different DePIN projects right now and make some passive revenue.
Dude, I might have to make an intro with you to these guys out of Arizona that they're doing a pretty crazy DePIN project, and this has been in the works for probably 3 years now. But they're working with the trucking industry, right? Like the semi trucks that are moving stuff all over the country. They built it's technically it's a DePIN tool now that it helps them with lifting the landing gear instead of manually cranking the trailers up and down. There's like a drill, and they attach it and they just pull the trigger and it helps turn the lever, and then it drops or lowers the landing gear. And while it's doing that, it's also technically, quote unquote, like mining and doing stuff like that for insurance companies. So I don't know, they're trying to tie it in with a bunch of stuff. They're also trying to tie it in where it's like tracking mileage and stuff like that. So may need to make an intro, because I don't know, maybe we can get them on at some point, or find out a little bit more about what they're doing. And I don't know, might be something maybe you can help advise.
I'm always down to learn,
trader,
man. Always down to meet more and learn more. So yeah.
Yeah, incredible. Well, that would be really awesome. Yeah, there are so many companies that are now doing things with DePIN technology. And what Bits was saying earlier about the token buyback and burn, that's a point that I want to kind of come back to, because I do believe, as long as, if they're doing buybacks, that's okay. You don't really need to burn it either, right?
Yeah.
You don't necessarily have to burn it. Like, you could just put it in a wallet, you're holding it, so you are taking it off of the circulation. That's still, like, it has the same impact, right? Because you are buying back, but you're keeping it for treasury, because at some point you're going to need that. So I think that was a good point. I just kept going back to that one. So William, the free apps that you talked about, it's incredible. We would love to have your referral links whenever, right after the stream. If you could, just basically comment in under the stream and, give us all of the links. I'll make sure that my community looks into it and they sign up with it. And I'll definitely be looking into it, and we could all, sign up using your links, since you are educating us and sharing so much of your knowledge and not gatekeeping it either. So that's really nice. And then the other thing is, of course, for everybody who does join these platforms, just do your own research. That's super important. And then the good thing about those products is that when you sign up, you could also sign up your family members, things like that, with your own links afterwards, right? So you can kind of grow your business that way. So William, I remember during one of our spaces previously, you were talking about helium hotspots, and one of your friends who was working with, I believe they were going to get like a contract, or they already got a contract with Disney. How is that coming along? Can you tell us some updates about that?
Yeah, so there's a lot of people out there like that have started like DePIN deployment businesses, right? So if you're going to be a DePIN deployer, you don't necessarily have to start a business. Like, let's say you have a friend, or maybe you have like a family member who runs a restaurant, and you're like, hey, I want to buy a hotspot and put it in here. Is that cool? Yeah, it's fine. Go ahead. Cool. Can I use your internet? Oh, sick. We can use your internet. Awesome. So that's typically how an average deployer happens. Maybe they have one or two deployments out there through friends and family. I would say you need to really start thinking about forming a business structure once you start branching out and like pitching all this to cold calling people. The reason you want to do that is essentially protections. You want to protect yourself. I would start an LLC, limited liability there. You're dealing with like real businesses, real people, and there's real consequences there. And so always have a contract ready, always have a business like set up, make sure you have your insurance. I mean, insurance is huge, because you wouldn't imagine when you're installing these hotspots, like sometimes you gotta be climbing, bro. You're gonna be going through like attics, you're gonna be hopping on roofs. Like, it gets kind of weird. Like, it gets very in the weeds. For a Web3 business, you wouldn't imagine hopping through an attic or on a roof, like being involved in crypto, but here we are. And so, just in case, you always want to have those ducks in a row. I just want to kind of preface all of this with that. So at some point when you start growing your deployment business, maybe you have 10 people lined up to have hotspots installed. So get your LLC started, get your insurance going, work up contracts. It's so easy to make contracts. Like you can literally just go on Perplexity, ChatGPT, all this stuff, like have a basic contract written up and then go to a lawyer and say, hey, does this look cool? This is fine. That's what I did. And it was really, really straightforward. Once all that's in a row, you want to start pitching, like cold calling, going out there and saying, hey, I have this product. The way I do it typically is I will go up and say, hey, I'm going to pitch the service primarily instead of the revenue, because the revenue, again, is not guaranteed. We talked about that, where it's like, hey, I don't know how much money this is going to make. Maybe this makes $100. Maybe this makes $1,000. Maybe this makes $20, right? And so I always go in pitching the service primarily, which the service is, hey, your customers inside your business are going to have better cell phone service, going to have stronger cell phone service, all completely for free. They're not going to be charged. I'm not charging you any money. And the way it works is, again, with Helium, AT&T pays me for the offload. And so I pitch it like that and say, hey, I'm getting paid to provide better cell phone service, with AT&T and T-Mobile. Here's this product. I'm going to install it. I don't charge you any money. All your customers are going to be happier because their cell phone works better in here, which subconsciously will make them want to come back to your business and, spend more money with you. You'll make more money that way. And if they're happy with that, I usually stop there. I don't even mention a revenue split, but if they're kind of like, okay, well, what's the added incentive for me? I'll then talk about, hey, I can also give you some revenue. I can give you 30% of whatever this thing makes, or even 50 in some cases, depending on who it is and how much money I think I'm going to make there. And so on and so forth. That's how typically the conversation goes. I don't even mention crypto for the most part. I mention crypto at the very end. And the reason I do that is because I don't want to turn them off immediately. Like, you don't walk into a business and say, hey, I have this cool crypto device I can install in here. They're going to tell you to F off for the most part, because not a lot of people understand crypto, let alone like a restaurant business owner. The last thing on his mind is crypto. The last thing on their mind is like, oh, I'm going to invest in this token. Cool. So I always go in with the value first, then the prospect of revenue next. And then at the very end, once we've closed, once I have the contract in their hands and they're signing, I talk about, hey, listen, I can pay you in a number of ways. I can pay you in ACH. I can pay you with Zelle, with Cash App, or I can pay you in crypto. And they say, oh, you pay me in crypto. I'm like, yeah. So like, then I break down like, hey, I can pay you in this token. I can give you cash. It's completely up to you. You don't have to touch any of this stuff. And typically I have like a 50-50 percentage rate where it's like, sometimes they'll do crypto. Sometimes they want just ACH transfers, direct deposit transfers. And it becomes kind of a tax nightmare at that point. But with the crypto wallets, it's really straightforward. You get paid H&T tokens and I send it to their wallet. Oh, here, this is how much I owe you. I did the math. Cool. Here you go. Pretty great. That's typically how the business process works. You have to get your sales hat on, guys. If you are not a salesman, being a hardware DePIN deployer can be very difficult for you. You might have to hire a salesperson. A lot of it is just cold calling. A lot of it's walking into businesses. A lot of it's just traveling and just talking, literally just talking to people. Like, and if you're not like really good conversationally, it's going to be a very steep road for you. I've been denied like hundreds of times. I've gone out and done 50 cold calls and got 5 calls back. Or I've gotten 5 like people to respond and say, "Oh, I'm down for this," So it's a grind. It's definitely a grind. It's not like the easiest thing in the world. But the great news is once you get it installed, once you have that contract closed, you're installed, you're in the business. It's extremely passive for the most part. You're checking on your hotspots every day. If there's something wrong with it, you contact the host and say, "Hey, is everything all right? I see my hotspot's been offline for 10 hours. Is your internet working? Is your power on?" All that stuff. So there is work in that regard, and you are doing payment distributions on a monthly basis or weekly basis, depending on whatever you agreed upon. So there is work involved still, but for the most part, it's pretty passive. Like I just check my hotspot. One of my hotspots earned $10 last night. I didn't do anything. I literally just like checked my phone and I'm like, oh shit, I earned $10. Sick. So, obviously $10 to a lot of people is not a lot of people. A lot of people is not a lot of money, but it's the scale, right? So if I get 1,000 hotspots earning $10 each, that's a lot of money. It's like, heck yeah. So it's all about scaling this business out, getting more hotspots out there. That's pretty much the process there. In terms of like the growth, you saw the growth on the Helium page. Hell, there's 124,000 units out there. They're growing every single day. There's hotspots popping up everywhere. And Helium's not the only one doing it, mind you, too. There's a company called XNet. They have a competitor called XNet. That's XNET. They also do carrier offload. They also do this deployment business. They're a little different to Helium in regards to the fact that, one, they only currently have AT&T as a customer. for their offload. And two, they don't actually have their own cell phone service. So Helium has their own cell phone service called Helium Mobile, like we talked about. XNet does not do that. XNet strictly is a carrier offload network. I believe they have a better payment deal with AT&T. So per gigabyte, you're making a little bit more money with XNet than you are with Helium. But it is the installation process is a little different. There's a lag time there. You're not going to be instantly making money. I can go into a lot of the details, of course. I'm not going to do that here. It's very different, I would say. But there are competitors in the space there. There are different deployments you can get involved with, and you don't just have to do XNet or Helium. You can do what's called vertical stacking too. So vertical stacking is when you have a Helium hotspot, let's say, in a business, and you go back to that business and say, hey, can I install this GeoNet antenna on top of your business? And like typically they're fine with it. You're already in the business. You're already partnered up with them. You're contracted with them. So they're already friendly with you. They're already making money. And so typically if they're like, hey, I'm going to make more money, of course I'm going to let you install these DePINs. And so you have people installing like 4 or 5 DePIN devices per location now, vertical stacking using different DePINs and different services and making even more revenue. So that's oh yeah, exactly. That's my favorite part is that multiple of my units, multiple of my hosts, they have multiple DePINs installed like on their premises. So I think it's just that's pretty much the breakdown of like how to run a deployment business, how to get involved, and how that process looks like.
That's great. We are right on time. We are going to be actually starting our live trading session soon. But William, this one was an incredible session. I don't think the conversation is over. I think there are so many questions that we all have. Yes.
We can do reviews too. We can do project reviews and whatnot too, like at some point if you want to.
Yes, please. Yes, absolutely. I think we need to start doing that because I want the community to be able to get as much benefit as they can from the bear market and learn about these technologies and how they can grow, right? That's why I'm still here, because usually what I do is just take off the barrier, just go away, and still build something in the background, right? But I'm not actively in the markets. I'm not actively doing spaces and things like that usually, or AMAs. But this bear market, I am definitely trying to educate as many people as I can so they can still benefit from the red markets, right? Because that's the market for building and learning and growing, so that you're ready for when the markets bottom out, and then you go full attack mode and you're good to go for 4, 5, 6 years.
Yeah.
And so, or whatever, depending on where you are, right? And so definitely want to bring you back in for another conversation very, very soon. But if you can, feel free to just share all of your links on X under the stream. We'll sign up with those, and I think it's going to be great. But thank you so much for joining, and we will be back again. Like I said, Bits. Also, thank you so much for co-hosting this one with me. Bits and I will be going live here shortly, and maybe give us about 5 minutes, and then we'll be doing market review with everybody. But yeah, this was a great workshop. Thank you so much, William, and we'll be bringing you back in again soon.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. What a wonderful stream.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.